So, ECig 101 Season 4 Episode 2, an introduction to rebuildables. So, you're watching this, obviously you're interested in a rebuildable device, but you don't have a clue what they actually are. You're probably either using a stock oil sub-ohm tank kit that we covered in Season 2. You could be using something like an Aspire Nautilus for mouth to lung, and you could be using something like an Aspire Zelos kit, something like that. Or you could be using the more direct to lung style of vaping, like a bit of kit from Smok, for instance, one of the latest kits from Smok, or even something from Vaporesso. But still, you're using a stock coil tank of some description. You might even be using a pod kit, and you're just generally puffing away in your pod kit, and you decide, you know what, I'm going to watch this Season 4 thing and see what it's all about. Rebuildable tanks differ in one major way from the stock coil tanks that we covered in Season 2, and they differ majorly from any other tanks that you're going to come across basically in most of the walk-in shops up and down the country, especially the likes of VPZ and Totally Wicked, because VPZ and Totally Wicked, as big chain stores in the UK, generally don't deal in rebuildable tanks anymore. The major difference between this and your stock coil sub-ohm tank is the coil, the bit that heats up to vaporize the liquid, essentially, with a stock coil system. And the same goes for pod kits as well, with a pod kit and a stock coil system. Once that coil is burnt out, in other words, you start tasting something burnt, you know something's not right with it, you generally pull that pod out, chuck it in the bin, get a new pod, fill it and pop it in your battery. Or in this case of a stock coil sub-ohm tank, you generally take the bottom of the tank off, you unscrew it in other words, pull out the whole coil assembly, chuck it in the bin, get a new coil out your blister pack, pop the coil in, screw the tank base on, fill the tank up, and you're done and dusted. Either way, whatever way you look at this, a stock coil system is a coil that comes as standard with the packaging. You've got the coil, the bit that heats up, you've got the wicking that surrounds it, usually cotton, and it's all enclosed in some kind of metal body in the case of a stock coil sub-ohm tank, or it's in a little pod tank in the case of a pod system. These fellas are completely different, because what you end up with a rebuildable tank and a rebuildable dripper, RTA, so RTA's rebuildable tank atomizer, RDA is rebuildable dripping atomizer. More about RDAs a little bit further on in this video. What you end up with these is no option for a stock coil most of the time. Some rebuildables can take a stock coil, but most of these rebuildables don't. And when you take the base off of one of these tanks like that, what you end up with is something that looks like this. And let's head round to the table cam to take a look at this, because down here at the base, what you have is where you would generally plug in a stock coil. So the base unscrews, you pull this out, you get your new stock coil and push it in. However, what you're seeing here, by the way, this is one of the larger rebuildable tanks from Steamcrave. What you're seeing here is what is called a rebuildable deck. It's a deck with screw holes in it. There's the two screws there, there's the other screws there, that then clamp on to two coils that you pop in yourself. This is one of the older tanks that's out there right now. But if we look at an even older tank like this is the Smok RSBT hybrid that got released a decade ago, and we take a look at that, you can see completely different design. But if we open this thing up, yeah, it's totally different design. This tank's 10 years old now, back in the days when Smok used to do rebuildables. We take out the chamber, what you end up with again is two posts with screws at the top, and these screws unscrew like that. You wrap your leg there, you wrap the other leg of the coil there, you screw it down, the coil lines up like this, and there's your wick port there, and your wick port there. With these newer tanks, postless deck systems for instance, you still have your screw holes, but there's very little posts going on because it's a much more newer style of technology, but the idea is still basically the same. You have a coil that is free floating with no wicking, it's just the coil by itself, and then you pop the coil in, you clamp the screws down, you make sure the coil is bedded in, and then you wick it by running cotton through it and dropping the cotton into those wick holes that you're seeing here and seeing here. Rebuildable. In other words, you build the thing yourself. You don't build the whole tank, but you build the coils, and you can actually make coils if you're handy with wires and stuff, which I'm not, and you're handy with drills. More about that later on when we look at episode 5, I think, about the coils, but you can actually make your own coils for these. Most people, though, including myself, generally tend to buy third-party coils. These are hobbyist vapors like John the Builder, for instance, Chico Coils that sponsors the UK Vape Show, or Ian CC Coils. Vapors, hobbyist vapors like ourselves that basically spend a bit of time every day making up sets of these coils, and they sell them online to general vapors, usually via a Facebook group or on Instagram, or in some cases via a shop. Why would you go through this kind of hassle? Because it's probably looking like a hassle to a lot of people that are fresh to this. Why would you go through this kind of hassle? Rather than just getting the coil, ripping the coil out with the wicking included, chucking that coil in the bin, getting a new coil out the blister pack, pop, screw the base on, fill the tank up, you're done. It's 10 times easier. And it is 10 times easier using a stock coil sub-ohm tank that you can buy off the shelf in VPZ than it is to use a rebuildable like this. This is the Osiris from Vapors Cloud, 25mm, it's not the big one. Got it sitting on top of the Q Mini, dual battery, 200 watt box mod. Why would you go through the hassle of doing all of that? 2 reasons. Number one, and it's the big reason that a lot of people jump onto rebuildables. You have a Smock TFV12, one of the older Smock tanks, or you have an iTaste tank. I think that's what Vaporesso are calling their tanks now. Generally speaking, you get those coils in blister packs of 3 or blister packs of 5, and each blister pack costs anywhere between £9.99 to £15.99 depending on how new the tank is, or depending on how many coils you get in the package. Now, depending on the liquid that you're using, that coil, that stock coil for your Smock, your Vaporesso, your Aspire, your Anakin tank will last you upwards of anywhere between 3 to 5 days for a very, very sweet liquid, up to maybe 2 weeks, pushing it per coil. Most of the liquids that you get on the market these days that are store-bought off the shelf of VPZ or Totally Wicked or your local vape shop generally tend to have quite a bit of sweetener in them, at least compared to the liquids that used to be sold half a decade ago. Your stock coil is going to gunk up very, very quick. As a stock coil user who's watching this now, you're probably nodding in agreement. That blister pack of coils, either 3 or 5 coils, depending on what tank you've got, will probably last you a month. A month. So you're spending anywhere between £10 to £15 every month just for those coils to keep your tank running. On top of that, you're buying your liquids as well if you're not DIYing. So you could be spending £50 a month, £60 a month on liquids and coils. If you're using a very sweet liquid, there's some out there, practically tastes like you're vaping Lyle's golden syrup some of the time, that one single stock coil might only last you 2 or 3 days. So instead of only having to buy 1 blister pack of coils, you're buying 2, maybe even 3 blister packs of coils a month to keep your stock coil sub-ohm tank running. So you're not only spending £30, £40 a month on liquid, you're now spending £30 or £40 a month on coils as well. Now here's the thing. This tank, which is the Osiris, which is the Osiris 25mm from Vapors Cloud, is a dual coil tank, like the one that I just showed you. It takes two coils, two tiny little coils sitting there, as you can see. Dual coil tank. You also get single coil tanks as well. I've had the same coils in here, for 5 months. 5 months. Because of the way that rebuildable tank atomizers and rebuildable dripping atomizers are made. You drop the coils in with no wicking. You put the wick in yourself. When the coils in this tank, and for that matter, any rebuildable tank and any rebuildable dripper gunk up, you can clean the coils out. More about that when we look at how to care for an RTA and RDA. So, we've covered the basics about a tank. What about a dripper? Drippers are basically tanks without the tank. Let's spin round and have a look at this, shall we? So, here's the Osiris 25mm, and what we've got here, if I can find the damn thing, where did I put it? I've lost it. Actually, I've lost it years ago, but where did I put that dripper? I had one sitting here, and now I can't find it. Seriously? Okay, we're going to use one of these. So what we've got here is we have got a rebuildable tank atomizer. The coil is sitting inside that chamber and there's a tank surrounding it. This tank holds about 4 ml of juice. This is an old school Goon rebuildable dripping atomizer. Big air holes on the side, no sign of a tank because there isn't a tank with this. If I was to pull the cap off of this, which I'm going to do now, what we end up seeing here is two coils that are free floating. Larger coils, much larger coils than you get in a tank. And in here you've basically got a cap and that's it. So I would wick this up by running cotton through there, and dropping the cotton so the ends of the cotton rest on the deck. But hold on a minute, Vic. There's no tank. Where the fuck does the juice go? They're called drippers for a reason. You drip the liquid through the drip tip, and this is why you sometimes see me calling, where is it, there we go, this is why you sometimes, it's a force of habit me doing this. This is not a drip tip, it's a mouthpiece, but because I'm using RDA sometimes, when you drip your liquid through the top, I've got a nasty tendency of calling mouthpieces on podcasts drip tips, and they're not drip tips because you don't drip on these, you drip on these. And basically what happens is when you're dripping your liquid straight in from the mouthpiece, that liquid is going straight down and hitting the middle of the coils. You've got cotton wicking in there, so as you're dripping the liquid in from the top, the cotton wicking is pulling the liquid into the coil. Drippers, RDAs, rebuildable dripping atomizers, these things, they generally tend to give better flavour overall than a rebuildable tank atomizer. There's a lot of people out there that are using these things. A lot of people that are using these things, rebuildable dripping atomizers, and this is why as we go further into this series of videos, the next episode up actually, we're going to be concentrating on rebuildable tank atomizers, but the episode after that, which is going to be episode 4, we're going to be concentrating on rebuildable dripping atomizers. Two completely different styles of vaping, but they both stem from the same branch. Rebuildables. No stock coils in either RDAs or RTAs like this. And not only can you reuse the same coil, if you've got a dual coil, it's coils, or if it's a single coil RTA, coil, but not only can you reuse the same coils in these tanks and in these drippers over and over and over again, and if you look after the coils well, they may last you 5, 6, pushing it 7 months. Generally speaking, a set of 2 coils for a dual coil tank like this will cost you just under a tenner. Yeah, the same cost for those 2 single coils that will last you 5 months, roughly speaking, if you look after them in this tank, against a blister pack of 3 coils for tenner that will only last you about a month, and then you need to go back to your local shop and buy another blister pack for a tenner. and another blister pack for a tenner, and another blister pack for a tenner, in order to keep up with the same 2 coils that I purchased 5 months ago in this tank. Rebuildables save you money. They also generally tend to give better flavour. Generally speaking, they generally tend to give better flavour than stock coilers. Anyway, that's it for the introduction, folks. Up next, for episode 3, we're going to be concentrating on rebuildable tank atomizers. See you in episode 3.